Hello guys, welcome to PGS7 Day 2 review. This is a football style macro review of PUBG Esports, so if that's something you're interested in, just a reminder the video is going to have plenty of spoilers, but let's get into Phase 1. We're now matching up with our three teams again, and we have Falcons, DNF and 17. We're going to watch them again. So we have Phase 1 here, which is actually a prison central zone, so a good zone for Falcons, and also pretty decent for DNF. I don't know how Salute is here. I think he is doing that purely because of the apps contest. But as you can see, Falcons taking a split with Wizard Tower, and this is called Trophy. And they also have Alamo, which is a very strong split, controlling a lot of the lines from all the central spots. DNF setting up on the west and in Junkyard, which is over here, and 17 controlling New Compound, as well as getting some of the dips just west of DNF. So all three of our teams are clumped in quite together, and none of them are really going to do anything until Phase 2 pops. Boom, Phase 2 pops. As you can see, we have teams starting to change their positioning. 17 over on the west, Falcons grouping up to Wizard Tower, and the idea is that they have a lot more lines from Wizard Tower, so I don't think it's too bad. I do think it's a scary spot to play, but I think they're playing it in a way that is actually quite good with people outside of the Wizard Tower. DNF controlling a lot of the central space, and next zone pop. Also good to note that 17 used this time to go out to get more space. In terms of space, DNF not going to do anything. Falcons are just going to focus on the east. 17 have a good amount of control on the west, as well as a line to play this dip in front of them. So this is mostly just an AFK zone for all three of these teams, and we're going to see the end game zone now. We have our late game zone, and late game zones are the most important shifts, so teams who get a good shift in the late game tend to win, because making less decisions in the late game means you can really take your time and do things for free. So for this shift, Falcons is completely out. DNF opt to actually play back into the ridge and leave this, as they know that T5 is going to have to do something, and I think they think it is a better choice to play for the west, as they are able to control this ridge, which should give them a good way to fight at least through the zone. I do think this fight is better, but DNF smarter team than me, so I'm going to give them, they know something that I definitely don't. Anyway, we have 17 as well on the southwest. They don't have to do anything, they can chill and maintain their control. Them having all of the high ground makes it very difficult for teams underneath them, like TKL in farm, to really pressure them that hard unless they commit to a full breach. So 17 quite happy with their spot, DNF quite happy with their spot, and Falcons do need to do something. So Fury ends up pushing Falcons and stalling, which is really annoying for Falcons, as it makes it difficult for them to actually play into their line or their next position in the zone, as Fury is sitting here in a way that they are going to get pressured. So they do end up losing a kick right next to Shrimpsy, which is really annoying, because at this time, if you lose one, you're in a position now where a team knows that you're three, and it makes them force their hand, or at least makes them think that they can force their hand even more. So as you can see, Fury are really doing as much as they can. Tig doing a good job by stalling in the blue, and all of Fury does end up going down. But at this point, Falcons are now 2 men. It's going to be extremely difficult to win this game. Right now, we have Falcons playing into the road, DNF slow playing on the north, 17 playing in their compound. DNF sends Salute to get an entry pick onto T5, and T5 hurry into the bunker. Falcons get taken out by New Happy, and New Happy also manages to take out DNF. So this leaves only 17 up as our top three teams. Interesting to note as well, T-Hill make a very good decision here and actually breach Xiaobei while the other three are across the road. It was very difficult for Xiaobei to really do much about this, because it's 4 people just getting close to him. However, after that, TKL have to cross the road, and they have 3 of EA, maybe even 4, staring at their drive, as well as 3 of 17. So they are going to die on that drive. So 17 is our last remaining team from our top 3 contenders, and on this next shift, they have, it's actually a really good shift for them. They can slow play again, wait for their north to be out, and try and position themselves over there. This next shift, however, very brutal for them, as EA really have everything here. EA should always win this game from this position, so it's a pretty solid effort from 17 to get third here. On to game 2 here, we have another beautiful zone for DNF and another good zone for Falcons here. So Falcons can get some good central control. DNF definitely abusing the fact that there is a hot drop happening in school apps. So as you can see, Falcons getting good control of the central positions. I think they end up centering up even more. DNF with an amazing split here, really controlling a lot of the western center. 17 as well, getting into school, and they have as Australian calls us dick and balls. That's what the compound's called. Don't blame me. But all our teams happy and set up in their phase 1 split, and now all they are really doing is waiting for the next zone to pop. And here's the phase 2. Boom. Really good shift for Falcons here. They have good space and control to fight up through these ways if they need to. So Falcons are quite happy with their positioning, as I do think they have one of the best spots in the zone on the northern side. So I do think there's better spots. I think New Compound and Hacker, these two compounds are better, but they have very good spot. DNF end up grouping on to J, which is in a phase 3 shift. It is definitely one of the better spots, especially if they get fed here. It's basically a GG from there if you get these shifts, because that is such a dominant compound. You're going to have to hold some breaches maybe. 17 as well, slotting in slowly, playing from school, and they end up actually losing one out of the car, which is insane, while they're trying to get up to dog cuts. So 17 end up losing one early. Falcons happy in the center, DNF 4-man in J. And once again, guys, once you're in these positions, all you're doing is protecting your space and waiting for the next zone to pop so you can make a decision, which is exactly what all these teams are waiting to do. And we have our next shift, another bad shift for Falcons, but they do have a way to get into zone, so they end up leaving their compound in zone to go out of zone. This is because they want to make sure they have access to deeper parts of the zone. That's why they head out east here. Anyway, if we look now towards DNF end up sending one person to the single yellow. And the idea behind this is if they have 3 people here and 1 person here, hopefully that's enough of pressure from this area to persuade people to either go around or go past them. Because if they are able to control both of these, they are subsequently able to get quite close to Hacker, this compound here. So that is their split and their idea. They're going to play into this position next. As far as 17 goes, they are slow playing up into Potato, as that is pretty much the only thing they can do. Very difficult position, especially in competitive. When you lose one person early, it does reduce your fighting power by a lot more than you think it does. Even though it's only one player, it does seriously impact how your team fights. So as you can see, we have a lot of teams slotting into the positions we expect them to. I'm not sure what the Falcons' plan was here, but I'm assuming they're doing some sort of pre-send, as they look like they're getting ready to drive somewhere, but they end up going straight back. The second zone pops, which is a pretty good shift for them. They have a straightforward game. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be a lot of people to fight, and they're going to get third party, but they do have a game plan, which is one of the worst parts about PUBG esports, is sometimes there's shifts that just really make it difficult for you to do anything. As you can see, DNF prepping to move into their bowls, and 17 as well, just slow playing through the zone. So DNF end up going into their bowl, and 17 ends up slotting themselves in the northwest, as well as Falcons slotting themselves in the northeast. So that's our main zone, and this next zone is really going to decide what type of decisions teams are going to have to make. And as you can see, it's a very difficult zone for DNF and 17, as well as Falcons being completely out. So all 3 of our protagonists need to make a decision here. As far as what teams end up doing, DNF actually end up sending 2 people to crash the wall. I think this is a very good decision, but I also don't know how the hell they didn't get someone knocked out, but I guess Akan wasn't playing. I'll have to watch this game again in more intense detail. But it was a very good decision for them, because now they're in a position where they can hold 17, and 17 really doesn't have anything to do. Now if we look back over to the east side of the zone here, we have Falcons beginning their push onto TE. It's a very difficult fight for them, and only say that because the second they start fighting, they are going to get third-partied immediately from the back, and it's something that they can't really avoid or stop from happening, which is pretty much exactly what happens. The second they start an engagement, we have Fury run over and get a knock on Quinn, and remember, losing players really sucks in PUBG esports. It makes it a lot more difficult to do things. But Falcons slot themselves in zone. DNF are fully committed to this Hacker compound now. And the thing that I love about how DNF plays, they're very slow paced, and they can get control of one building, but they know that they cannot give 17 any opportunities. So they just sit in the building and wait. Of course, if you've watched the game, the next zone will be slightly telling. But as far as this current stage in the game, 17-3, Falcons 3, DNF 4. They're in really the driver's seat to win this game here, as long as they don't do anything silly. Falcons end up getting 2 knocks on T5 and push them immediately. They now have a new spot in zone. It's going to be really difficult for them here because their next position is kind of ass, put it bluntly. So they have to drive and do something. They get wiped. So good effort from Falcons. 17 loses one while DNF still staying in the building, extremely slow. And then they proceed to do something that was probably one of the most int things ever, and they're going to kick themselves because this really was a not silly decision. I don't want to say silly because this is a great team, but it wasn't well thought through. They send 2 people out to try and max point collect, but in doing so, they end up actually getting both players knocked. And this is why you want to do things as 3 if you do want to do things, because a 2v2 is not an advantageous fight. A 3v2 is, but a 2v2 isn't. So DNF loses 2 people to the 17, and they also lose Guman to EA up on the high ground, so over up here. And what does that mean? Well, now BGP are going to go try and clear the solo out. And if you look at this shift, this should be a free DNF win. So DNF definitely kicked themselves. I know these players, they're definitely upset that they died like that. But as you can see, like, this was one of their games that they really should have capitalized on. Anyway, not going to harp on DNF. They're a great team. We have our Rondo game. I personally hate Rondo, and I hate zones like this one coming up. And the only reason I say that is because it is a difficult zone, because it can go either side of the river, which means you either have to commit to one side, commit to the other, or play for both. And if you commit for one and it goes the other side, you're kind of screwed. And if you play for both, sometimes you're not playing for anything, so it's really difficult. Anyway, 17 is our team that gets, our protagonist team that gets into a fight really early, and that is because Little Ghost ends up actually ratting this compound, and he does get breached by a 4-man of Twisted. 17, an aggressive team, so they believe that they should recrash as they have a player who is in a position that is not necessarily known, so they're going to utilize this. However, Little Ghost isn't able to stall for long enough, so Twisted are able to take one of 17 down. Now, if you go watch this fight, which I highly recommend you do in actual 3D and not just a 2D format, you can see how incredible 17's patience is, and especially Xiaobei. Twi is slightly off, but Xiaobei is playing a position that is extremely sneaky, because 17 and Twisted are both smart teams, so both going to be extremely slow paced, and Xiaobei ends up getting 2 knocks when they jump across the roofs to try and clear them. So extremely well done from Xiaobei here. I want to give a huge props to him. Maybe he doesn't get enough credit for how impactful he was this tournament, so I want a quick shout out to Xiaobei. But 17 do end up killing all of Twisted, and they only lose 1, so that's a pretty good outcome for them. But we're going to go check on our other teams now. Let's group up with our other protagonists. We have Falcons on the east side of the zone here, and DNF on the southwest. When zone 2 pops, Falcons decide to group onto their compound, and DNF decide to do the mother of all rotates and head all the way through Jejena City in the blue, and they continue going all the way east and still in the blue, all the way until they slot themselves up into this road dip on the east. Falcons sending 2 people out of their compound to get a foothold into the zone, and 17 looking for an entry on the north side. Believe it or not, another team wrapped in the blue right behind DNF, so starting off before this zone even pops, DNF are in an immediate 4v4, so they do not care about zone here. They're focusing on their fight at hand. As you can see, Falcons have slotted themselves on the south side of the zone, and they wait for zone pop, 3 of them in a car ready to go, with Tig, their anchor, prepared to send them somewhere. This is a really good shift for them, as they do have the ability to slow play. However, it is difficult because of the pure amount of people around them. So Falcons are going to really struggle here to actually maneuver around without getting third-partied or rided by random people sitting in the forest and the hills, which is exactly what ends up happening. 17 as well on the north side of the zone. They have no information onto the next set of zones, so they're in a very rough position, and they're probably going to go for an isolated fight or a send. So they end up sitting in the blue and slowly dying. They manage to take down a few of Furia with them, but as far as getting into the zone, there is no chance that that is happening. DNF manages to win their fight on the east with keeping only one player dying, only one player dies, and Tig does end up dying for Falcons, which really sucks, because Falcons having 4 up here would have been lovely for the end game. So DNF finishing up their fight, sitting up on the east side, and Falcons happy with their south side of the zone. On the next phase shift, however, Falcons are fed, so this is a good shift for them. If they had 4, this would have been awesome. I do truly believe if they had a 4th player here, they would have been able to farm a lot of kills, so it's unlucky that Tig gets ratted. DNF also in a position here where they are going to get pinched. If they set up for their north, they're going to get pressured from BB on the south. If they set up for the south, they're going to get pressured from Pero or EA or whoever wins the north fight. So a very difficult situation for DNF here. And as you can see, as zone closes, they end up playing very quiet, which I'm not sure why. I'm not very familiar with the terrain here, so I couldn't give you better insight. But DNF end up in a position where they're stuck outside of zone. And if you're outside of zone past phase 3 or 4 in PUBG esports, you are pretty screwed. Falcons on the south sitting tight and holding their space. Once they have maybe an inkling of an opportunity, Para and BB start fighting, they start investigating, and this could just be a way for them to also try and gain more space as they start pressuring out east. But I do seriously think that they're just trying to get more space. I think the fight ended and they know that, and they're just trying to make sure they have a box of control to get into the next white line. So Para and BB end up fighting on the northeast, and Falcons slowly come and approach and try and see what's happening. However, when the next fight of T5 and BB happens, they immediately look to take advantage of the knock on T5. The only thing they did not account for, however, is when Kick gets knocked from T5, there's actually a two-man of New Happy who are hiding away, riding for a long time, it really was. And that means that Falcons end up getting pinched from T5 and New Happy, which was probably not something they were expecting, as this area of the map, my terrain knowledge isn't perfect, but I would not expect that if I was them. So this really sucks them. I think that they could have gotten a few more placements here. You know, every point counts. They did have a good side of the zone, so it does really suck that they were basically spoiled by two men of New Happy. Onto my favorite map here, we have our phase 1 for Artego and another amazing center 1 shift for DNF. And remember guys, C1s don't really matter, but if you're getting a lot of C1s, you don't have to make as many decisions when it comes to rotating. So DNF definitely very happy here. Falcons doing a big send all the way to the compound east of Hey Musa. They quite like this position. We also have 17 doing a send all the way into the west side of Godok. If you look as well, DNF just a huge split, really controlling so much space. It's going to be annoying for them to regroup, considering some people are riding around them. T5 have one person, and also TE in the southwest side of Godok. So all three of these teams are now just going to sit here and wait. And we have phase 2, another beautiful zone for DNF. So DNF have one of the best compounds in zone here. They are going to simply regroup here as any normal team would. 17 also in a position where they have to wait for backfills or slow play into zone, so they end up slow playing into the corner of Godok once T leaves. And Falcons also consolidates a bit more to the north here. They want to keep their numbers tight as they don't want to lose anyone. So all of these teams have their positions, and again, nothing really going to happen until next zone pop. To decision time for the next phase, and who would have guessed it, Falcons and 17 have to make a decision, and 17 end up getting in their cars and pre-rotating, and they end up playing the coast, and they lose one person on the drive. So another position where 17 is a 3-man, which does suck for the late game. However, at least they have managed to make it into the next zone as they have nothing on the east. We also have Falcons on the north controlling all their space and hopefully slotting in nice and slowly into the north side of the zone. Very difficult for them, however, as they don't have much space to move. And DNF as well with their compound, and reminding everyone in competitive phase 3 to 4, it always shifts off water. So when we look at our zone, we can tell that there's only a few amount of shifts that are really possible, and it's basically going to come as far east or north as possible. With our C3 to 4, we have a northern shift, so this is pretty solid for Falcons. If they can find a spot to foothold themselves in the north, they will be uncontested for the most part. DNF also need to leave their compound, but I do think they will slowly slot themselves in on the east side of the zone. As we can see, our next team to go out from our protagonist is actually 17, and the way this happened is because New Happy send a person to run on foot. So December 12th runs on foot while the other 3 hop in cars. They breach the solo on the far side and end up killing all of 17. Difficult zone for 17 when you really think about it. They didn't have many decisions in the early game that they could capitalize on. But as far as our protagonists go, we have DNF still and Falcons, and both of them managed to make it to the next zone. Moving on to our last zone here, our 2 protagonists end up fighting each other this zone. So interesting to note as well, they both slow play for as long as they can until they really need to make a decision. It's also super interesting to note, as you can see, both teams doing the exact same thing in terms of structure, except Tig has done his job and he is coming to group to take that fight that they know they need to take. But DNF have a much better terrain advantage than Falcons. Falcons pushing up, DNF looking down. So definitely a different terrain advantage for DNF here. So that means that DNF is able to stall out in a way that forces Falcons to stay further north of them, which is really not a spot you want to be in, because once you're forced to stay there, it's very difficult to make that timing run back up. And both teams now, with the next shift happening, they know that both of them, the only way they're going to get points is to fight through this forest. So both teams are going to subsequently fight each other, and whoever makes it out is going to move and do the exact line that I was showing. So as you can see, DNF managed to beat Falcons in this engagement. Salute dies, and Heaven makes his way in slowly, but he is found by TE. So DNF going out in 6th, but every other team of our protagonists making no placement points this game. On to our last 2 games on Miramar for day 2. As far as the zone 1 goes, we have a power grid zone, so a solid zone for 17. They're going to control most of the priority compounds south of the rocks, and San Martin Falcons are going to slot themselves into the north side of this zone. They're probably going to control these rocks, as it is a very good and powerful position. DNF also able to slot themselves on the east, as Guman doing an early rotate into this low ground compound, which will give them maybe some audio information on this high ground prio. So all the teams have ideas on what they want to do. As you can see, 17 taking all the good compounds south side of the rocks. We have Falcons preparing, and they almost end up in a scuffle with Pero, but Pero slow playing on the east, while Falcons manages to pick one off. So that is going to be a telltale sign for Pero to get the hell out of there. Meanwhile, DNF preparing on the east, trying to get up onto these priors, and once they do so, they are happy with their positioning, and all teams are just going to wait now. Once the waiting has concluded, we have our phase 2 shift. Beautiful zone here for DNF, beautiful zone here for 17. Falcons not quite central, but they do have at least, you know, some access through the rocks, as they're going to be able to control a lot of in front of them with Huin's high ground rock. So as far as what we're really going to see happen, I think 17 is going to stay where they are, DNF is going to stay where they are, Falcons are going to stay where they are, and everyone's going to wait for the next zone, because none of these teams really have to make any drastic decisions. Onto the zone shift that matters. This zone shift is crazy for Falcons. Another zone where they're not in at all, but 17 getting a beautiful shift here, as they have a dead center feed onto their warehouses, so they're going to try and regroup as quickly as possible. And if you watch the stream, 17 do a fantastic hold of this compound. So we actually had BGP pick-upping onto them, and 17 were able to 4-man hold them out. They were able to 2-man hold out the 4-man of PGP, which is fantastic for them. And as you can see, lots of teams utilizing this timing to breach. Twisted end up actually, I guess, missing the timing just barely of TE doing this as well. So they get stuck on the north wall, which really sucks for Twisted, because they had a good position north. But what does that do? That now frees up Falcons' line into zone, so Falcons are able to sniff out that there is not much presence north. DNF slotting themselves into the east, but ultimately Falcons, the real winners here, as they're able to slot themselves into the north side, and they have a way to play down through all of these 1,000 ridges. So they're in a good spot now, thanks to Twisted leaving. And really the only team from our protagonist that is kind of fucked here is DNF, and DNF need to make a decision. Something I missed quickly, DNF end up losing Guman to Forest, as he is unable to leave when they go into Picado. As far as what they do on this next shift, they are taking an E-pickup, and when they move on this E-pickup, they decide it's hard to land on this shack, and they probably see one of Furia over on the north, so they're concerned about landing northwest. They end up landing into this new area of terrain, which is like a broken truck. But the problem with this broken truck is that this warehouse compound is going to be able to abuse you, which is exactly what ends up happening. We have BB just using util and taking their time and clearing them out. So that is our first protagonist dead. This shift here, terrible for Falcons. So Falcons are now in a position where they need to find any sort of way to get into zone, and they also want to try and clean up as many points as they can here. So tricky spot for Falcons. 17 obviously very happy. 4-man in a warehouse. They have full info on the team to their east. No one's going to breach them before they breach this east. And they also have Twisted still sitting on that north. So Twisted end up going down. The east gets breached. Another situation where 17 just have to wait. Falcons trying to make a move, get knocked, get rezzed. They find their way into the white line, and they can now take a chill pill and wait. From here, their game is very dependent on the zone, and as you can imagine, as Falcons, they did not get the zone shift that they wanted. It makes it very difficult for them, and they're in no position where they can slow play here, so they need to make a send, and they opt to crash the west side of the warehouse, which was actually a really, really good decision. As you can see, they are able to slow play and make it difficult for 17 to really feel confident enough to go clear them, which is really, this is actually really, really good from Falcons. I'm surprised they're able to make it all into the warehouse. So this buys them some time at least, and now all they have to do is wait. They're in the same boat as 17. The second 17 gets knocked, they just consolidate, sit in the corner. They're really not looking to make any mistakes. They do end up killing all of BB on the breach as they breach. Sorry, Furia, not BB, my bad. Furia breach them and they clean them up. So Falcons and 17 in a weird standoff where each of them control one side of the warehouse, but eventually when 17 need to make a move, they do have the numbers advantage, so they are able to clear out positions slowly, and they find a pick on Shrimsy. Kick gets a little off angle, but ultimately Falcons clean up some clean points that they really shouldn't have been able to get, and 17 going out just after them, putting 17 in second and Falcons in third from this game. On to our last game. Finally, these videos do feel like they take a while. I'm sorry for people who don't really have the attention span, but this is something I do enjoy doing. Anyway, enough yapping. We have another, like, oh my god, DNF, like, chill with the phase ones, but beautiful phase one for DNF. They opt to control a lot of the central positioning, so we have Heaven, Deal, and Guman and Salute split in a triangle formation. Very dominant split here, guys. They really are in a great spot. 17 sliding into the south side of the zone here, opting to take jungle, and Falcons going in to the northwest side of the zone here. They do end up actually getting caught off guard as Furia have already placed some players in the low ground compound. Luckily for Falcons though, they're really, really good at taking team fights, so they 4-0 Furia. So despite not making any placements here, Falcons are already cleaning up a decent amount of points, and as far as positioning goes now, they're kind of in a weird spot. They have no information and they're stuck in a low ground compound, but those 4 points early are really going to matter. They take their time and they're happy to sit here and wait for zone to pop, and from here they can make a decision. Phase 2 pops and we have DNF grouping up to the warehouse, and Falcons actually opt to crash the gas station. Really poor timing as Pero end up regrouping just as they crash, but somehow Falcons actually are able to win this engagement with Pero, but they do get immediately recrashed by Begopar. DNF and 17 end up getting to a fight, 17 pressing up onto their ridges and DNF already sitting there. So both these teams are now fully committed into a large-scale team fight in a compound that does not have any buildings. So a difficult fight for them. Salute getting knocked, 3v3 here. It's really not the situation that either team wants, as they both had really good positions into the zone, and 17 is definitely feeling annoyed because they didn't even have to do this at all, but hey, they won, they probably don't care. So 17 and DNF still fighting. DNF managing to outpace 17, slow down enough to the fact that they are able to keep 3 up, and from here they leave. So 17 crippled with only 1 player alive, and DNF taking the position in front of them. From here, the next shift is brutal for DNF, and also 17 has 0 chance of making it. So DNF wrapping south, and they are going to be pinched immediately by Twisted and EA, as well as 17 sitting in the blue. So 17, DNF, both just blue tanking. DNF ends up going out before 17, but that is it for our protagonist. And that is all for today. Thank you guys for watching again. Sorry for this long form content. I know that most of you don't really care, but it is a niche that I actually enjoy making content about. So I'm going to continue doing this for PGS7 Finals, get the last day out. I'm going to try and finish it before groups start tomorrow, and then we will focus on making some other videos just to give you guys something to work with in between. So thank you again for watching, and let's get to day 3 tomorrow.